Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out tonight to our last in a series of talks called the Harvest Lectures. And tonight is going to be really a lot of fun. We've got Regina here with us and I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute. And I'm John, and I run Hazelnut Community Farm. And yeah, so we've had an amazing time so far in these harvest lectures. And I've just announced that we are going to try and create a podcast out of them. You can still access them on YouTube as well, but look out for our podcast if you want to encounter them on the go. Regina, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit before we get started?
Hi everyone, really good to see you all. I'm Regina. Have a funny accent because I'm Austrian. I grew up in Austria in the countryside. Always loved nature, loved spending time in nature. And I'm really passionate about permaculture lifestyles, learning to live close to nature and doing that with communities. And since 3 years, I work for Arosha UK, and I run or look after one of their programs called Partners in Action, which is partnering with Christian landowners and organizations that have land to create spaces for nature and for people. And yeah, really excited that Hazelnut Community Farm is one of our partners.
Fantastic. And I'm John. I run Hazelnut Community Farm, and it is a joy to work with Regina and with Arasha. And we are an urban farm in, well, really kind of a community garden right in the center of Bristol. And we are a growing community that we grow as an act of worship, and we give away at least half of what we grow. And we're making those connections in our new site as well. And we're also a network. So, kind of the word farm is really about kind of how we are a patchwork of different growing communities that all support and look after one another. So that's kind of who we are and how we exist. So tonight, the topic is unlocking the power of church land, which is quite a big title. Um, I think that one of the things that really inspires me is that, especially in England and the UK, coming from America, we don't have it this way. Is that this idea of this parish system where there's a church in every parish, and if that's just the Church of England, and you take all the other churches together, is that there really is a representation in land for every single person. And if we are to look at this land not as just a place to come and sit on Sunday mornings and do other projects, but to see it as the land itself as important, I think it could be really transformative. So, what I want to do is kind of give you my top 10 tips as to how to engage with the kind of church land and start growing. Does that sound all right? Top 10 tips, yeah, of how to unlock this. So, I think the first thing is that anyone can grow. Any church with any piece of land can grow in some way. You might say to me, well, John, we're in a really urban setting. We have no land. But what you do would have is potentially a courtyard. You can do things with pots. You also will have other people that come to your church that might have yards, or they might have gardens, or they might even have windowsills where you can plant something. There's always the ability to plant something. And I think the idea is of planting something is good because in some areas you're going to only be able to plant a little bit, but other churches might have acreage that they could use. And if everybody is using what they have, collectively we'll be able to maximize our land. So I think because of growing in pots, anybody can grow and you can learn how to do that. So I think that's the first thing is just to say that anybody can use their land for growing. And I think growing vegetables as well as flowers and as well as pollinator friendly flowers. So anybody can do it. I think the other thing I'd like to say is to think about how to use your land. So I like to think in kind of three sets is that you want to think about your plants, your animals, and your humans. So a lot of times we're talking about net zero or rewilding, and we think about just the plants and the animals, but we forget about the humans. And I think we've got to think a productive site is impacting plants, animals, and humans. So I recommend thinking about plants first, thinking about what grows in your area, what is what grows well in your site. The best way to start this is just to sit and get to know your site, listen to it, enjoy it. When does the sun come up? When does it get hot? When is the shade? Where's the shade? Things like that. And if you want to know about what you can grow in terms of plants, you can always go to your local garden store and ask, or look on YouTube as well. But I think it's great to do a mixture of pollinator friendly flowers, or slash wildflowers and vegetables. And that brings us into animals next. So at Hazelnut, we like to grow pollinator friendly flowers, things like verbena and lavender, and beautiful flowers that are gorgeous in themselves, smell great, but they also attract bees and other animals. We recently grew some corn that didn't go so hot, but instead of just throwing it around, we tied it up and we see it getting eaten by birds and squirrels. So it's good to think about animals too. You want animals to come into it. Now, you might say, well, John, what about slugs? Slugs are proof that Satan is real. That's theologically accurate. Anyway, but no, even slugs are all part of the fact that if you're welcoming animals, you're going to have some animals that will eat and do that, and that's all part of it. And you've just got to relax and do your best. You know, we do things like beer traps, and there's different things you can do, but you want to encourage animals as well. And the other thing is humans. There's no reason why you can't also grow vegetable. And according to every scientist that talks about climate emergency, is that there's real issues with food coming up, and food insecurity is real in cities and in different areas. And so we need to be growing productive gardens that grow vegetables as well as flowers. And that's essential for the church to grow. And I think it's the most important act for the church now, to be able to create beautiful gardens that grow food as well. I'll talk more about that in a second. Number three, are you guys? Hope you guys are tracking with me. I'm on to number three now. So first is anyone can grow. Second one is think about plants, animals, humans, and the third is a space for peace. We have lived in troubled times, and I think that creating a garden is a place where people can come in and encounter the common grace of creation and of nature and find peace. So not only do you grow a garden, but put a bench in it, create a space for people to come and sit and just be. Let people calm down and be into your space. So instead of creating a chaotic space, create a space of peace. And I think that naturally, if you're planting, thinking about plants, animals, and humans, peace will be a part of it. Number four, a really simple one. This is a fast one. You want to be peat free and you want to be toxin free. So use all your soil that's peat free. We don't want to be destroying peat bogs for our growing. There's no need to do that. Use peat free soil and do not put any chemicals into your land. If you want to know a great way to do this, Google no dig method, or you can also Google permaculture principles for a bit of inspiration. But there you can grow loads of stuff with really healthy soil without any chemicals into it. So stay away. And that includes slug, even though slugs are satanic, you do not need to use slug repellent. Yeah? That's number four. Number five is engage with community. The last thing we need is a garden club. You know, so many churches, you hear them fight about what flowers they can do and this and that. It's such a myopic view. A really good garden should invite the community into it. Invite your scouts to come in, your local scouts to come in and plant a bed. Encourage your local older folks to come in and plant some stuff up as well. Whoever's in your neighborhood, and find a way to invite them in. Look around and think about who you can invite in to take part in this. Maybe you have a local gardening club and just invite them to come in and give you advice. Um, Once you find that you're planting a garden, just think of it as a community resource that reaches out to your community. That's one of the reasons we encourage people to give away 50% of what you grow. So you know you're not growing just for yourself and becoming a gardening club, but you're always thinking outside the bounds of your garden in order to like go out and meet people and welcome people into your garden. It has to be both ways. It has to be a community resource. So engage with the community. I'm cracking through these, so Regina will have time. I'm on to number six now. Yeah, number six is I encourage you to find a rhythm. So at Hazelnut, we have taken some years, and I think eventually we're going to probably write something up about this. And it hasn't come right away, but we're getting better at finding our rhythm. So our rhythm is that we're obviously trying to really connect with nature and what nature tells us as creation about creator. And so we find that we're about to head into what we call slow Christmas. So slow Christmas is where we slow down. We recognize that our beds, our flower beds are no longer, our veg beds are no longer producing. They've gone dormant. There'll still be some things there. There'll be some green manure. There'll be some uh, chard and some winter lettuces. But overall, it's a lot less productive. And that tells us we need to slow down as well. So part of our rhythm is to slow down. And we come out of that in about middle December and we enter into winter, where instead of growing, we're a community that eats together and talks about why we do what we do, looks back at our values and our vision for the purpose of Hazelnut. And by the time we're done with that, we enter into March where we do seed blessings, seed swaps, and we begin to think about our planting. And then that enters us into the craziness of planting in spring, harvesting, early harvest, the heat of the summer. And then we're celebrating a proper harvest from about the beginning of August till about now. So we spend a lot of time thinking about harvest. So in a sense, our harvest festival starts in March when we bless seeds, not just the day that we give canned food away. So find your rhythm. What's your rhythm? How do you re-engage with creation, and what's your rhythm like? The seventh one is a really simple one, and that's take time to celebrate. So often we're on to the next thing. I know I'm guilty of that, but actually taking time to stop, to rest, to enjoy your garden, pull out a nice pull out your pull up the bench, have a nice cold drink, look around and enjoy the hard work. Invite your community that you've worked with to sit and enjoy the peace and beauty of the garden as well. So take time to celebrate. Number 8 is to encourage you to think differently about this action. This is not like you do church somewhere else and now you're doing a garden. What I'm encouraging you to do is see that garden as prayer and worship. Is you are engaging with creator. Your physical body, the earth, is where we meet with God. This is an opportunity and a place for you to get your hands in the soil. Did you know the old monastic movements, old monks used to work the land all the time? And they would oftentimes do it knowing they would help them process through pieces of their thoughts that they didn't know they had. So it's the same. Some people say this about walking their dog or doing exercise. I find that when I get my hands in the soil and I'm working, oftentimes I'll have thoughts, I'll make connections, I'll find that my anxiety and stress goes down and I relax and I think deeper thoughts. So this is a place where it is prayer and worship, engaging the body, engaging the spirit, engaging the mind, engaging the community. Um, Almost done. I got 2 more. Number 9, tell your story. I encourage you to make little signs that mention what you do. Um, Remember to tell your story in church to anyone that will listen. It's one of the best ways to get members. The more you can tell your story, what you are aiming to do, where you've come from, that'll help encourage people to come and be a part of the story. So tell the story of your garden. Mention what you're trying to do and where you've come from. And the last one is point to creator. So we in the garden, at least in our garden, we talk about creator, creation, and community. And really all of creation is pointing back to creator Jesus. And so we see that it is an act of worship and it's not just about us, but we're finding and re-engaging our imaginations, re-engaging our worship and our community back to finding God in the midst of all of this. And it really will help us in the midst of a crazy old world. So quick recap, and I'll just read them off to you real quick. Number 1, anyone can grow. Number 2, think about plants, animals, and humans. In that order. Number 3, create a space for peace. Number 4, no toxins, no peat. Number 5, engage with the community. Number 6, find a rhythm. Number 7 is celebrate. Number 8 is this is a prayer/worship time. Number 9 is tell your story. And number 10 is point to creator. And I would say I'll give you one little free one, and then I'm going to hand it over to Regina. And that's also don't be too hard on yourselves. If you grow something and it gets eaten by a slug, it's okay. If it doesn't, everything you want to do doesn't happen right away, that's okay. Just have a go, and it'll turn out great, and it'll be a great impact on your church and community. We'll do discussion after, but I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Regina now, and then we can have some discussion in a bit.
Thank you, John. So John gave me 15 minutes. So I spent my afternoon practicing my speed talking. So just two main things that really excite me about working with church land is that I think we can see it as a really great opportunity to transform both small and big spaces for nature. And the other thing is, if I get this going, yes, that because church communities, as it already says, communities, it's a group of people that are on the land. It's just an amazing opportunity to have a space for people that helps connect people with wilderness and also deepen their awareness of God through spending time in nature. And so I also have 10 steps for you, actually. We planned this very well together, John and I. So I created 10 steps of, that help me thinking about how to transform spaces, so church land, to create just incredible spaces for both wildlife and people. And so the first one, oh, I can't, just a sec. I've got you in the way. Oh, okay. First one is to stop, look, listen, dream, and pray. So literally just go out onto the land. If it's wet, get your wellies on and just spend time in it, because I really believe that the answer to many of our questions, even about where to start, is already in the garden. And so to start off with, just venture out there, look and listen. And I love to sometimes sit in a space and just ask God, how do you see this space? What did you have in mind when you created it? And so just spending some time with God to just reimagine the space. And then the second point for me is, in England, it's often time for a cup of tea, right? And I think very often that's a very good starting point to gather community together. And so it's about making a good brew, and then just sharing a bit about what God put on your heart for this space in nature. Share your passion, share why you care about it. And then also be ready to get surprised by who actually in your church community will want to join you. Because often it's not necessarily the people that we think would join. And so be ready for a surprise. And then when you have your cup of tea with people, also ask them, find out what their passions are, what their dreams are, what their skills are in terms of looking after nature, and see what expertise you already have in the group that is interested in helping you care for this piece of land. And I think one thing that is, for me, really special about church families is the diversity, because what brings us together is that we all love God, that we all worship Him, but everybody has really different backgrounds, different experiences of life. And so this diversity really brings value to it. And so I think it's really important to try and engage every generation, because every generation actually brings a very unique part. So I love to learn from my tiny little niece. So the little girl that you see in here is my favorite person on the planet. And I just really learn a lot from her to just simply enjoy nature. When she found this slow worm and just her face that shows delight and excitement, it's just really inspiring to me. And I think often we have forgotten how to sit and just spend time in awe and wonder of what God created. And so, but I think that's a really important thing, actually. And then our teens or plus, they have a lot of energy and passion. And so to engage them helps to get stuff done at speed and with fun, which I do quite a lot where I live. And then the 30 plus, I think have lived a bit longer already, know about consistency, know how to deliver a project, know how to find resources. And then there are always our elders. So this is my guru, Jim, a good friend of mine, who just always shares a lot of his wisdom and knowledge about growing things with me. He teaches me a lot about patience and stillness and calmness. And so I think when creating a team to work with, it's really important to try and connect with every generation, because they all really bring something very unique. My third step is gather facts. So we have observed, but that was more of a reimagining with God. But then gathering facts for me is more about really looking at the space in terms of what do we have? How much land do we have? What are the habitats that we can work with? Is there grassland? Are there trees in this place? Or do we not have any land, like John already said, but can we create spaces in pots or in raised beds? And so just observe what is already here and what can we actually work with. And one fun thing to do also as a community event is create a bit of a base map of wildlife, and ID apps that can help with that, to identify things, because many of us might not know how to identify all different kinds of wildlife. So helpful apps are PlantNet. Merlin Bird ID is really great, where you can record bird song and then it will identify the bird song for you, and so you know what birds are singing on your land. And then Seek, you can take pictures of insects and any kind of wildlife really, and it will help you identify it. Or you can also get ID guides, these fold-out guides. They are really amazing to work with kids, because they have really beautiful pictures and information in them. So those are helpful tools to help you with actually creating this wildlife base map. And when you have observed and seen what is on the land, this will allow you to actually let nature lead you, let nature lead the decisions that you make, and to help you decide what your focus areas are going to be. My fourth point is, this is more of a brainstorming thing. So once you have people together that are excited, give them big pieces of paper and just collect ideas. Any idea is a good idea. So this is not a time where you think what is possible financially, or possible because obviously some churchyards you have to go past quite a lot of red tape in terms of what you're allowed to do. But this is just a space to be really creative. So the only limit is your own imagination. Think simple, think creative, think small, think big. Radical is a good thing. I think in church we often like to play it safe, but I think God doesn't really play it safe. For me, when I read the Bible, it's full of people with radical ideas for their time and their season. So I think we also can dare to be a bit radical and think of creative things that maybe haven't been done in our churchyards before. And then the fifth step for me is generate a plan and have courage when doing it. So now we have already established what we have on our church land on the ground. We also have established what we would like to achieve. So we've got a whole list of dreams in our brainstorming papers. And so with those things, we can create a bit of a pathway to get from where we are to where we would like to be. And I think this is also maybe a time, once you know a few elements of what you would like to do, you can try and find online resources to find out how to go about doing those projects. So if you want to create wildflower meadows, for example, there's a lot of information on the Arosha Eco Church website. Also Target 25 on the Arosha website, or Caring for God's Acre has amazing information. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can actually go out and find information that is easily accessible and free. And also dare to just do it. Start with something tiny. My sixth point is find resources. I intentionally put it only as point 6, because I think often we first start thinking about, do we actually have money to do this? And then we already stop without even going to get creative and find ideas. But I think if we start to gather people, get creative, get enthusiastic about doing something really practical on the land for nature, and then think about the resources afterwards, it will encourage us to be more creative, to actually make it happen and not get stopped by thinking we don't have what it takes. Because once you've got a team, you will realize that actually between a group of people, you will have a lot of tools. Maybe people have stuff in their sheds that they don't use anymore, or they have plants to share and can bring, or maybe you have somebody who is really passionate and would love to sponsor a wildflower meadow and bring some wildflower seeds. So number 6 is trying to find, okay, how can we now source what we need to be able to create what we would love to create? And also, I sometimes, when I can't figure it out, sometimes just asking a child is a good idea. They come up with amazing, very simple ideas often. And then number 7 for me is actually carry out the work. So that's when you start creating a nature club of a core team of people who really want to actually get on and do it. People that are committed to it and that want to be part of the whole journey. Because a team is much better than working alone. You get stuff done faster, and it's just way more fun as well. And then another point with when you start actually working on things, it's good to start small and simple and then build up from there. So the first step could be as simple as just creating a small space in your churchyard where you decide, okay, you won't mow it anymore. You want to let wildflowers grow and see what is in there, and then put up a few signs so people don't think you have neglected the space, but actually know that this is intentional, and then observe it. So you can do things that are quite simple, don't need almost any resources, but do already make quite a big difference for nature. And if you start planting, just make sure that you work with native species, or if you are experimenting with new things, just really make sure that they're non-invasive. So I think, yeah, that is really important. When thinking about a churchyard, diversity is always key. The more diverse your space is, the more resilient it will become, both for climate as well as pests. And so creating very diverse spaces is just great. And then, like John already said, celebrate things that worked well, bring people together, share the stories. And also, I think every setback can be seen as an opportunity to learn. So don't get discouraged when something doesn't work, but actually then step back, see what went wrong, and then work with nature to solve it. And you will just get to learn something new, which I think is also very exciting. Number 8 is measure and monitor for changes. So keeping records of wildlife throughout the time, so year by year, is also something that really helps to tell stories of hope, because then you can show with new wildlife that comes on site that the work that you have done has actually had an impact. And so it's a great way to tell stories. And one easy way to do it, you could join Churches Count for Nature, for example, that happens every spring. And so if once a year with your church community, you count everything you have on site, it gives you a nice picture over years how your church land has changed and how it has improved for nature. And also, you can use that as another way to engage communities. So find creative ways to create a churchyard diary, for example, with pictures, with stories written by children. And so actually monitoring things and keeping records can be a really creative activity as well. And then number 9 is be prepared for flexibility and the unexpected. So we are surrounded by change in every sort of way at the moment, and especially climate change also brings new challenges when working with nature. So don't expect all the things that always used to work. So we need to start to be creative and flexible and work with nature, even as it is changing. And also working with people can bring unexpected changes. And so it is really a space where being flexible is really important. And maybe also start seeing change as a good thing. I think once we actually encourage change do change in a positive way, it can make it much easier for us to deal with the unexpected. And number 10 has disappeared, apparently. Oh, Number 10 is don't give up. So yeah, be ready to also look for information in unexpected places. So for example, when we had this massive drought, it was last summer, so not this summer, but in 2022, yeah, in East Sussex especially, it didn't rain for weeks and weeks throughout the summer. It was very hot. And so for me, for example, I remembered what I learned in Zimbabwe, how they deal with drought with mulching. And so I went and looked up information on mulching and just got really excited that by just putting a mulch layer on, it actually needed much less watering from me. I could plant the hedgerow plants that I had planted with mulch, really survived the summer. And so yeah, go to places and find information from people who have already dealt with challenges that we are starting to face. So yeah, and yeah, never give up. Stay as busy as a bee.
Oh, thanks, Regina. That's so great. Well, we got a lot to think about now. So, what we're gonna do is go ahead, throw it open to questions. So, you can put some questions in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask us. But I think Regina and I are happy to discuss anything.
Thank you. That was really interesting and has given me quite a few pointers to think through. I've just recently left a church where I'd been for a long, long time and moved to a different church, and they are just starting to move into eco church and thinking about their land and their environment outside and how they're going to implement that. So it was quite exciting to hear what they were doing. I do a lot of forest school work with young children in the week, so it was just lovely to think of how this space near us is going to be used more for the church, the community, and I think just different aspects drawn out from what you've said about thinking about the seating and the place for, I suppose, reflection, appreciating through the seasons, linking with local groups. It all sounds quite exciting. I think also thinking about climate change and how things are changing, particularly in the summer and the heat. And we tend to think through the winter of warm spaces and people coming inside, but also what can we provide for people, particularly in the city where we are, to shelter when it's really, really hot as well. So yeah, it's got me thinking through a lot of things.
That's great. I think especially capture that excitement. And I think it's exciting for what what your church is going to accomplish. I think the one thing I would say alongside of that is it's okay, like I think I said earlier as well, it's okay if some of that stuff will be done in first year, second year, third year. I think when we started, people were like, well, but you're not doing everything you said you wanted to do. But I think it's just to be able to have the patience to know that things will come in the right time, and you can just start with where you're at, and then it will grow, and
Yeah.
the right people will come along, and things will happen. So just kind of watch it establish. It's good. It's really exciting.
Yes.
Jonathan, do you have a question? Do I see?
Yeah, so it was really about examples and networks, So I think it often feels to me that, like as John said, that Hazelwork Hazelnut is a network community as well as us meeting in Bristol, which is where I and Bryony go. But I somehow feel like great chunks of the church or the different denominations are not particularly interested in any of this stuff. So it's really about examples, about mutual encouragement between churches in a given area or even nationally and so on. So do you think there is a there are examples out there that we could look at as hazelnut, but perhaps churches, like you said, that might only have a courtyard can go and see what other churches with similar kinds of environments have. Alternatively, those with many acres of churchyard. Are there places to go and look so that you can find like people in similar positions?
So on the Arosha UK website, on the Eco Church site, you can find quite a few stories of different eco churches that have transformed their spaces for nature. And there's quite a good variety of rural churches and urban churches. So that's probably quite a good space to look. And they also keep sharing different stories on social media. So following Arosha UK on both Facebook and Instagram, you will keep seeing stories of different churches, of what they are doing on their land and in their churchyards. That's probably quite a nice space to find encouragement and find ideas.
Okay, and just as a sort of supplementary, have there been any that have been really disastrous for whatever reason? They really got it wrong and had to start again. And what lessons can be learned if there are such things?
I've heard of churches that have gotten it wrong, but it's never been about nature. It's been about people.
Okay.
So when they get controlling or they set a bunch of rules, you can do this, but you can't do that. It gets competitive. That's when you see things that can go wrong. But I've never seen someone plant a tomato and then disaster ensues. It's usually about the kind of normal church politics. Is what I've heard mostly.
Yeah, and I think maybe challenges that some churches face again and again is that when teams suddenly get very small, so projects can slow down quite a lot and things go wild. But I wouldn't see that as a disaster, to be honest, because nature is still thriving there. And so I wouldn't call it a disaster, to be to be very honest. Yeah.
The other thing I'd say, Jonathan, in terms of like inspiration, definitely look at churches, but I think it's been my experience at least to be a bit like a magpie, where you just get little bits from all over. So I found inspiration at National Trust properties. I found that inspiration on walks and visits. So I'm just always looking. I always take my camera and I take pictures of flowers that I want to be interested in. Think, what is that flower? I'm gonna look that up later and take a picture of it. And I think it's always just finding everything interesting, and there's gardens all over, so you can kind of bits and pieces. The other thing is YouTube is just such a great instructor now, so you can literally Google or YouTube plants to grow in pots in September, and you get loads of videos of what you can do and how to do it. And you can just piece it together through kind of those videos and stuff like that. That's another way. We got a question from Polly for you, Regina. It says, say more about the churchyard diary. I like this as an idea of engaging children. And do either of you have ideas for using narrow strip of land against the north side of our urban church? It's in a shade a lot of the time. Do you want to go first, Regina, and talk about the churchyard diary?
Yeah, sure. So churchyard diary, you can just get as creative as you would like, but the idea was that if you, for example, with children want to create a churchyard diary, that you do it on a either bi-weekly basis, but create this space where kids go out onto that strip of land and observe, take pictures of beautiful things that they find, or of things that they want to find out what they are, or get them out with papers and let them draw what they see on that strip of land. And also maybe as part of that strip of land, maybe plan it with the children together, so they can actually first, as part of that diary, make a plan for the space, and then you engage them in actually planting it up, or creating a wildflower space, or creating a bug hotel. And so they can week by week write down in that diary as it develops. And you can also take little samples of it. Like, I don't know if you maybe have a flower press, or they are very easy to create. So maybe press some plants and even stick plants into the diary. And so you can each week do it with kids in a really creative way. And then over the year, you get this beautiful book of how nature developed on that strip of land.
I think bug hotels is a great idea. Again, YouTube, you can always look up nature loving vegetables, things like that. Ferns, you get a couple of different types of ferns to put in there, are always really beautiful and fun to watch, and love shade as well. So that's it could be interesting.
There are also quite a few shrubs. So if you go onto even websites of nurseries, you can put down that you have quite a shady place, and then they give you specific species that grow well in shaded area. So you can plant flowering shrubs that are amazing for pollinators as well.
Hope that helps. We've got another 10 minutes, so happy to answer more questions. Jonathan and Bryony, another question?
Yeah, oops, this is me. I had a question, but I also had about shady gardens. We've been in some fairly wooded areas, have been planting things like raspberries and blackberries and rhubarb and things, which can be quite happy. And if you want to grow some food, those kind of things can be good in shaded areas. I was going to ask about kind of the dynamic with church hierarchies, who, because John will say that you know our work and our hands in the soil is our worship, but how you persuade people in our church structures to take that seriously, because for them that's a very alien concept. So it was something about how we get taken seriously and how we help the church to actually understand what we're doing.
Do you want me to go first, Regina?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, Bryony, we talk about this quite a lot because Bryony and I work together. I think it's just difficult. I think I'm more convinced that this seems unique now, but is going to become more and more the norm. So, I mean, there's a time when growing vegetables was seen as like, kind of what poor workers did. And then all of a sudden you had a world war and you had Dig for Victory. You had rations come in, you had every piece of land being dug up and used for vegetables. I mean, I suppose part of what we're doing is believing, and it's not that we want to be pessimistic, but believing with food in things happening, that we're trying to learn how to grow and use spaces now for a future that's changing climate emergency. So that's part of what we're doing. Also, I think we're also creating, like I said, places, peace and beauty that makes sense now as well. I hope that at least at Hazelnut we're learning the language of influence more over time, but we're certainly not there. But I think we're better than we were 2 and 3 years ago. So I think it's just going to constantly learn how to speak about what we're doing and encourage people to join in. I hope that helps.
Maybe if you're in a church that is not worshiping outdoors, that is not doing what Hazelnut is doing, maybe to start with seasonal services outside. So you don't necessarily start off saying we want to spend every Sunday outside, but create specific Sundays where you worship outdoors, where you spend time with God in His creation, and do that intentionally, maybe to start off with 4 times a year and then increase it slowly. And there's one, it's called the Gathered Community Garden, where a part of a congregation from a church is actually meeting in a garden like Hazelnut Community every Sunday morning. But every other Sunday, more members of the church join the garden, and every other Sunday they worship in their normal church building. And so that's also maybe a way of doing it, so a bit of a compromise. Because I think getting people out onto the land and actually reconnecting with nature and learning to love it again I think we only protect what we care for. We only care for what we love, and we only love what we know. And so if we don't spend time outside and reconnect with God in nature, I think it's quite hard to care in a way that it really makes a difference. And now that we are really facing a climate crisis, we do need to actually speed up and get people out there and get people connected again. And so even if you do it 4 times a year is already better than not doing it, and then increasing it slowly as more and more people experience it and actually learn to enjoy it. I think they will realize the importance of it. But if they never experience it, they won't understand, I think.
Yeah. Another thing I'm thinking about as well is when I started Hazelnut, what I realized early doors is that I'd encountered 3 different types of people. The first was like what a lot of leadership could call early adapters. So some people I'd talk about the idea of Hazelnut, and they would be like on board right away. They'd be like, "Yes, Regina's this type of person. Yes, I get it. Let's do it. I see it. I'm on board with you. What do you want me to do?" That they're not the majority, but they're your key startup people. And the second group of people are the people that are like, they're like, "That sounds like a good idea, but I can't quite understand what you mean." Like those are the people that need to see it. Once you actually start and they see the idea physically, they'll be like, I get it now. I'm interested. And then there's the third type of people that are never, ever going to get what you're doing. Never are they going to come to what you're doing or understand it. If anything, they'll probably oppose what you did. My first PCC meeting that I talked to our church about this, the secretary of the PCC meeting, his response after me laying out this whole vision for Church in a Garden, his response was, we've got badgers at the bottom of our garden. Be careful of badgers. And I thought, this person's never going to get it. Like, he's never going to come and understand what we're doing. And you know, it really is really helpful though, in that it's okay to say, I don't need to convince everybody. And I need to go with who does get it and who wants to do it. And I can let other people go. And so if if your church leaders are people that will never get it or want to do it, it's okay to say, oh, I might have to go somewhere else or do this a different way. I might have to do it in allotment. And you can still do a lot of amazing stuff in an allotment.
Mm.
I'm struck just listening to you, and it suddenly occurred to me that over the course of my life, I have been to outdoor services before anything to do with Hazelnut, and very often they've taken place in ruined churches, that where people go once a year or something. So the one local to us here in Wales is something I know that happens in Tintern Abbey, where they have which is a ruined abbey, but they have a carol service. So I'm just thinking maybe a special event or events outside that you could actively invite quite a lot of people to would be a way of starting.
Yeah.
Tinton Abbey is beautiful as well. I mean, that's quite an experience, a place to have a carol service. That's a stunner of a ruins, I'd say. I think we've got time for one more question, if there is one. If not, that's okay too. Anyone have a final question for us? Anyone?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. It was more an observation rather than a question, but I guess it's like since the pandemic, as many people found, we spent more time locally in nature and appreciating much more what was around us. And I certainly know that, just before that, I was probably getting more interested in growing things and finding out more locally, about, plants and climate change and everything. But I think what you were saying about having that place of peace and beauty is almost like a bit of a cycle. For me, in the pandemic, it was having somewhere to go where I noticed change. I then just felt the need to just dig a pond and have a wildlife area in the garden. And then that led to, you know, frogs coming very quickly and frog spawn, and just getting so excited about the changes of the seasons and the life cycles and everything that was coming to the garden. And now I think it's just wanting to widen that out as well, and thinking, yeah, why is church any different? You know, we have these beautiful grounds. There are places that are so underutilized, and there is so much potential. So yeah, I think I just feel quite excited at the moment.
That's brilliant. I think that's a great starting place. Although I would offer a warning at this point is that once you start, it's difficult to stop, because you'll find that you love it and you encounter God outside, and it becomes a bit weird going back in church sometimes.
Yeah.
So beware. It's like, oh man, I really encounter God so easily outside. It's kind of weird coming back inside. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. But again, look for this as a podcast.